the people we see on TV or YouTube, they can seem like they have it put all together. Life looks easy, life looks perfect, and it feels unattainable. But what is the truth behind the curtain? Does being clean come naturally to some people? Are we living without? Are we judging others for having clutter? Can you really get a decluttered and organized home? Let's dive into what no one else will tell you so that you can realize that it actually is doable.
I grew up in a messy house. I thought, I'm creative, I'm free spirited, I'm kind of messy, it's fine. That doesn't affect me. That's not a big deal. And honestly, I don't know, maybe in the past it didn't affect me as much, but now, again, just navigating a really busy season, just lots of things going on. I just feel so sensitive to that. And I feel like when our house is in order, it doesn't have to be perfectly clean, but when it's just picked up, pulled together, I just feel like I can just my body just sighs, and it's like, okay, I can fully relax, rest, recharge before we take on another day.
I was a messy kid. My mom was tidy, but I grew up in the 80s and the 90s with consumption. And I felt like we needed to collect things, to save things for later, to save things for good was what my mom always said. So I thought something was wrong with me because my house was messy and I couldn't figure out why.
I have friends that got married at the same time that my husband and I got married. And I had lived overseas for a couple of years before we got married. And so my stuff was in a storage unit. My husband was already established in an apartment when we got married. Then we got a lot of wedding gifts. And so we had all this stuff. And I had this mentality of, well, I don't know, because we're not in our final home. I don't know what I'm going to need. So I might as well keep it all. So we had wasn't really a 2-bedroom apartment, but it was called a 1-bedroom and a study. And that study was stacked to the ceiling with boxes of stuff that I was just like, well, I don't know yet. I don't know yet what I need, so I'm going to have it.
Once I was married and had kids and was working in the emergency department as a nurse, I remember being so overwhelmed by clutter that when I would come home after a 12-hour shift, I literally just want to collapse in my husband and my children's arms. But instead, I would feel like I needed to clean and I would be grumpy about it, I might add. Or I would just run into our room and hide. I would ignore it and just dissociate into a book or something. And my house was a disaster. And it felt like my life was a disaster and that everything was going to continue to get worse.
I was embarrassed to open my front door. I would put off letting people inside. I would host events, but it would take me 2 weeks to get ready, right? I would have to declutter first, which was the time was just shoving everything in the primary bedroom so I could lock the door, right? And then I would spend the second week cleaning because there had been stuff everywhere and I hadn't been able to clean.
Now, I remember some friends from the East Coast of Canada explaining the pop-in concept. They'd say, oh, it's just a pop-in, which means somebody just shows up at your house. And this is a common thing. Any East Coasters or from elsewhere in the world, let me know. I know that this is a worldwide thing that's acceptable, but honestly, I don't know if I've ever heard of a scarier story. I still like to have just a few minutes to mentally prepare. But in the past, I have had people come by, and before I decluttered my house, I was just so embarrassed. Now it's not so bad. I literally just want to mentally prepare myself. I wasn't born good at decluttering. It doesn't sound like the other two ladies were either. It was out of desperation or necessity. And another worry I had, and a lot of others have, is that if they make a mistake when decluttering, what if we declutter something important?
It's just so strange to me. I don't miss any of the stuff. We're conditioned to believe all these products are going to fix our problems and make life easier. And isn't it amazing how actually they just make life harder? And so I just don't miss any of it.
But what if you feel like you could manage more? I love how Dana explains this.
Every individual has a clutter threshold, and we mentioned that before. It's the point at which you personally can keep your space under control, right? And if a space is hard to keep under control, it has too much stuff. That is just the fact. And I had to realize this was a big part of my own realization, was that my mother has a very high clutter threshold. And the clutter threshold is not your preference for amount of stuff. It's what you can keep under control, right? So she could have a lot of stuff and keep everything neatly put away. She could, know that the thing that she needed was at the back of the cabinet and move 15 things, get the thing that she needed and move the 15 things back. And that's her personality. That's how she functions. I grew up thinking I needed to have all this stuff, but I didn't have a high clutter threshold. I have a very low clutter threshold, meaning I can't handle that stuff. As much as I wish I could have it, as much as I want it, I can't handle it. And so the only way for me to have a space that's under control and that stays under control is to have less stuff.
Sometimes I work with clients who don't want to show me photos, and that's fine. I get it. Or friends or family are worried that I'm going to judge their house. But I get it because I struggled in the past too. I just don't have pictures of what my house was like before because who would keep pictures of the mess? I just have pictures of like my kids and stuff. But I am not judging anybody. There's a reason why we decluttered in the first place. And a lot of people worry that when they declutter, life is going to be harder. And here's the thing, is life easier? Are we even faking what is actually happening behind the camera?
I was better able to do the things I was wanting to do when I brought all that clutter in. I could actually do those things when I let go of the things that didn't fit in my space, right? Like, so I had brought all these things in for the crafty and creative and, idealistic person I wanted to be, but because there was so much, I couldn't actually be that person. And so it was like the letting go of the majority of that stuff, not all of it, but letting go of so much of it to where it only fit in the actual space that I really truly had in my home available, giving priority space to actually being able to do the thing, like, open table space around it to where I could do these things. Then I actually was able to become the person who I was envisioning becoming as I brought those things in. So it's this, it's that catch-22, right? Like you're bringing the stuff in for who you want to be, but then it ends up keeping you from being the person you want to be.
As I mentioned before, I am a nurse and I have seen a lot of lives end early. So I'm kind of obsessed with people living as happy and healthy life as they can. And for me, I feel like I always say food, water, and shelter. Your home is your shelter. And I put this content together, like started making videos about this because I was just so darn excited to show how amazing life can be with less stuff and less mess.
Clutter makes everything harder. It's harder to find the things you need. It's harder to make dinner at the end of the night. It's harder to get dressed in the morning, like just to do all the things. And so I thought I was grateful for our minimalist home when our kids were little because it definitely made that season easier. But I think I'm more grateful for it now because I feel like I can be present as a mom and I don't feel frazzled and I don't feel like I'm, letting my stress leak onto them because I'm just always running around. And so I feel like I'm really able to enjoy this season now with our kids. And I also realize I don't forget things when it's like, oh, they're signed up to bring snacks, or it was Corbin's birthday the other day and he wanted to bring treats to his classroom. And I'm like, I'm on it. Like I've got it. Like it just makes all the pieces kind of fall into place. And I don't find myself forgetting things and being behind and being frantic anymore.
But what about sentimental things? Life moves on and it can be sad and scary to let certain times or people go. Are we heartless? Are we decluttering all of the sentimental things? Do we keep any of them?
Now our sentimental things are actually special and they're curated in a way where we can revisit them, and we actually do. In the past when the kids' baby things, it was spread out across multiple totes and in different places. Like I wouldn't have said, hey, let's go find the outfit you wore home from the hospital. That would have been like a crap show, right? Like pulling out bins and then they're digging through everything and it creates a big mess. Now I can pull out their memory box and I'm like, yeah, here it is. Let's look through it. Like it's fun to revisit it. So when everything's special, nothing's special, right? And so by having like a curated collection of these things, it's so fun. And I just see that as a gift to give our kids, that whenever they leave the house or they want their memory box, they can take it with them. And then it's already neatly curated and they can look through it with their kids or their spouse or whoever they want to. Like, I just feel like that's such a gift to give to them.
Now, I can be a big softie. Here are some things of my dad's from when he passed away. And I don't keep like a ton, but I do keep some. I also have baby bins from when my kids were little because sentimental things are important. And I love like the great Peter Walsh. He said, all of your sentimental things should be able to fit on the dining room table. So we honor those sentimental things, but we recognize not everything is sentimental, right? And once we recognize that, it gives us like the permission to let a lot of things go and to keep some things that are important to us. But sometimes we get a vision of ourselves struggling to declutter. Maybe we feel like we're going to be surrounded by an even worse mess. We're going to be overwhelmed. We're going to get stuck. And we worry that decluttering is going to be too much work. Is it going to be messy and hard?
I thought that the way to declutter was what most people tell you to do, which is to pull everything out of the space and then only put back what you want. Well, I would pull everything out of the space and think, wow, that looks amazing, completely empty. And then I would turn around and there were the piles of things on the counter or on the floor or in the hallway. And I would just shut down because it was so overwhelming. Or I would put back what I wanted in that space. And then I would think, well, but I still have all this other stuff. Like, what do I do with that? So it just would keep me from decluttering because I would think, okay, well, last time I tried, boy, the house was completely messed up for 3 weeks after I did that. So I don't want to do it. I don't want to declutter unless I know for sure I'm going to have enough time. So how much time do I think I'll need? Which I'd never been successful. So I never knew. Right. So I'm like, I probably need a full day for that. Okay. When am I going to have a full day to actually spend? You know what? Actually, I probably need a whole weekend. I need to send the kids off to my mom's house. You know what? Actually, I should probably wait for Christmas break, and that whole week there, I'm going to really, well, guess what I didn't want to do over Christmas break, right? And so I just kept putting it off and putting it off. Meanwhile, it grew more overwhelming. And then I would estimate even more time. So then it just was this never ending cycle. So because my house was so bad and every space was overwhelming, I had to come up with a way to make progress and only progress. And so that's where my no mess decluttering process, that's where that was born, right? Is I'm like, so what I do, basically the boiled down version of it is one item at a time, final decision by final decision, and acting on that final decision.
So it doesn't have to be a marathon every time you declutter. Here's the thing. If you decluttered every day for a year, that would be 365 hours. Half an hour, 182 hours, okay? That's a lot. What about 15 minutes? That's 91 hours, okay? 91 hours. Think about how much you could get done in your house if you decluttered for 91 hours. And when you're done that, you might be like, okay, well then what?
And we count progress as success as opposed to finishing as success, right? And when I shifted into saying I can spend any amount of time, whether it's 5 hours or 5 minutes, or I thought I had 5 minutes and I only had 2, as long as I'm following the no mess process where I am acting on each final decision and I'm not doing anything where I set it aside for later or put it in a box for later or make a pile, as long as I'm only following this progress and only progress method, I don't have to know how much time I have, which means I can get started or I can do a little here and there and make real actual progress. And that's when my house started to change.
Dawn actually got her family involved in this process.
So it has been really fun to look back now and see how that consistency and sticking with it, even when people were grumbling, has really paid off. And now I don't feel resentful because I'm a Enneagram 2. So I'm like the happy helper until I feel martyred. Like I will help you all day long until I feel like you're taking advantage of me or I'm the only one doing everything. And then I am like not fun to live with, right? So I had to recognize that like I need everyone around me to be helping and pitching in.
Anyone can do this. It's not an overnight process, and that is okay.
It does get easier over time, right? We practice and we build more confidence in ourselves. So it's definitely a process. We love for it just to be very quick and neat and tidy and, not get hung up on things, but it's just a process. I don't think there is a way that you can shortcut it. Like it takes time to trust what you're doing, the decisions you're making, that you're not going to miss stuff. Like I just think for most of us, it just takes time to develop that confidence in ourselves.
I like to think of it like building up muscle. If you put in the reps, those muscles, they are going to get bigger. And it is the exact same thing with decluttering. The more and more you do it, the better you are going to get.
I do so little in our house now when it comes to cleaning and picking up and even cooking. Now I can share that load with everybody. I just so distinctly remember thinking like, is this just what it's going to be? Is this just what being a mom and managing a house is going to be? Because it was hard, it was messy, it was not enjoyable. It just felt really hard.
Just Dawn, Dana, and myself were not tidy to start with. We had to figure this out. And it wasn't exactly easy, but life is so much easier now. And it is so much better. And there's a great way that you can do it too. Anyone can do it. Anyone can get a decluttered home. I made this video to simplify the whole process to declutter your home. Stay tidy and mighty. I hope something great happens for you today, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Thank you so much for watching.